How do the cracks in a nation's foundation eventually break its most prestigious institutions?
Well, it's the defining question, isn't it? Because those fractures, they don't they don't just start in the marble columns of some massive global bank.
Right.
They don't begin with a sudden market crash or a rogue trader. They start much quieter. They start in the paperwork,
Yeah.
at the dinner table, just in those mundane, everyday moments where a system decides who gets to feel secure and who has to constantly prove their worth.
Welcome back to episode 8 of our deep dive into Dr. Pooyan Ghamari's visionary novel, Fünf Eide. And if you were with us for episode 7 of our deep dive, we spent a lot of time on Clara's realization, that idea that rights aren't just, gifts to be generously handed out by the powerful.
Gekla, they're inherent.
Right.
Yeah.
And today, we're not just jumping timelines, we're sort of tracing this conceptual through line. We're looking at how the very specific, subtle fractures in Swiss identity from the 1980s and 90s bled directly into the global financial infrastructure of the 2000s.
And that's the exact trajectory we need to follow today, because the author doesn't just treat society and banking as two separate worlds. The novel treats them as mirrors.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, like the architecture of denial that a country uses to manage its citizens is basically the exact same architecture a bank uses to manage its toxic assets. And it all begins in Basel in 1988 with this scene that just fundamentally deconstructs the illusion of belonging.
Right, Claire's husband, Daryoush, going through the naturalization process.
Yeah.
Let's dig into the mechanics of this scene, because it is just agonizing in its sterility. Daryoush is sitting in front of this commission. He has lived in the country, worked in the country, built a life there.
A whole life.
Yeah. But now he has to compress his entire human existence into a series of bureaucratic checkboxes.
Just reducing him.
Exactly. Profession, address, language proficiency, criminal record. I mean, he runs a lab, he helps repair local playgrounds, but the commission isn't looking at a man. They're literally just looking at data points.
Which is, that's just the fundamental mechanism of state bureaucracy. It operates by reduction. Daryoush is being forced to translate this complex, lived reality into a format the state can easily process and categorize.
Right.
And notice the power dynamic here. Clara, who is a native Swiss woman, is waiting outside. She deliberately chooses not to go into the room with him.
Which is such a specific choice.
It is, because she understands that her mere presence would warp the room's perception of him. If he stumbled over a single German phrase and she jumped in to clarify, the commission would immediately weaponize that.
Oh, for sure.
They view him as dependent, as someone who, hasn't fully assimilated.
They are actively looking for a reason to find him lacking. And the pinnacle of this comes when Daryoush steps out of the room, looking totally quiet and depleted. Clara asks him what happened, and he tells her the commission asked him an incredibly pointed question.
Yes.
They asked him, do you have Swiss friends?
I want us to really analyze the underlying logic of that question, because it is entirely designed to measure his worth by his proximity to the in-group.
Right.
It implies that his value as a potential citizen isn't based on his contributions or his character, but on whether the existing establishment has, deigned to socialize with him.
Exactly. Okay, let's unpack this. It's like being asked to prove you love your family by showing a receipt.
That is exactly what it's like.
It's an insulting premise.
Yeah.
Daryoush's response is brilliant, though. He tells the commission that he doesn't know how to sort people by their passports when he's sitting down to eat dinner with them.
And from a philosophical standpoint, he's absolutely right. But a bureaucracy doesn't want philosophy. It wants compliance.
Yeah.
It wants the applicant to validate its categorization of the world. By refusing to play their game, by refusing to just list his friends as these cultural trophies, Daryoush gives what the commission interprets as a bad answer.
Which makes Clara ask him why he's even putting himself through this humiliating process in the first place. Because she is 6 months pregnant with Lena at this point.
Right.
And Daryoush explains that he wants this citizenship because he carries responsibility in this country. He doesn't want his contributions to be constantly weighed against this really precarious sense of belonging.
He wants his daughter to know he wasn't just a guest who could be asked to leave.
Yes.
Right.
He wants his voice to be a right, not a gesture of the state's gratitude.
Yet, when the certificate finally arrives in the mail months later, the magic trick kind of fails. Daryoush looks at it on the kitchen table and simply calls it paper.
Just paper.
Just paper. The state has granted him permission to exist within its borders legally, but it hasn't changed who he is. It is the illusion of belonging. A document doesn't erase the underlying societal divisions.
And that theme of rights being treated as reluctant gifts It crystallizes just 2 years later, in 1990. Clara is listening to the radio, and the news announces that women in the canton of Appenzell Innerrhoden are finally getting the cantonal vote.
In 1990.
In 1990.
Yeah.
But the crucial mechanism here is that they didn't even vote for it internally. A federal court had to force the canton to implement it.
And Claire's friend Agnes has this reaction that just cuts right through any sense of national celebration. She calls the whole thing embarrassing.
Yeah, Agnes points out the mechanical failure of the moment. Because a voting right is practically useless if the structural inequalities remain completely unaddressed.
Exactly.
If there is no childcare and all the unpaid domestic labor still falls entirely on women, then a piece of paper saying you can vote doesn't suddenly grant you systemic power.
This prompts Claire to return to the archive she's building for Ruth, and she revises her own understanding of what a right actually is. She writes down that a right only becomes a right when it can be enforced.
Which strips away all the romanticism of the law.
Totally. A right on paper is just a suggestion if the infrastructure doesn't exist to back it up.
And we see this tension over national identity, like who decides, who belongs, and who is protected, explode in the 1992 EEA vote, the European Economic Area vote.
Such a pivotal moment.
This is a massive geopolitical debate over whether Switzerland should tie itself closer to Europe, and the author stages this macro-level conflict right in Clara and Daryoush's living room.
It is a masterful use of setting. Clara and Daryoush are having this intense, high-stakes argument about the soul and sovereignty of the country.
Right.
Clara is deeply frustrated by the isolationism. She doesn't want the country to govern itself based on a fear of the outside world. But Daryoush offers this highly impartial, investigative analysis of the electorate's mechanics. He basically dissects the no vote.
Yeah, and he points out that people are voting no for vastly different reasons.
Exactly. Some are terrified of downward pressure on their wages. Some are terrified of losing democratic control to a distant European bureaucracy. And some are simply driven by xenophobia.
But Daryoush pushes back on the yes side, too. He points out that voting to integrate can also be driven by fear, the fear that Switzerland simply isn't enough on its own.
He completely strips away the moral superiority from both sides of the argument and reveals the core mechanism driving the nation, which is anxiety.
And right in the middle of this heavy debate, we have 4-year-old Lena sitting on the floor, completely ignoring the geopolitical crisis above her head, and she's just sorting buttons by color.
And she holds up a red button.
Yeah, Daryoush sits on the floor with her and asks why she likes that specific one the best, and she says, because it doesn't pretend to be blue.
Wow.
That innocent observation from a 4-year-old perfectly distills everything the adults are fighting about. Authenticity. Not camouflaging yourself just to fit into a pre-existing system.
And that desire to hide your true colors to fit the system. That doesn't just apply to citizens navigating bureaucracy.
Oh, definitely not.
Fast forward a few years, and Lena discovers that exact same strategy of pretending is the foundational business model of global finance.
This is where the narrative makes a massive leap, and those thematic threads really pull tight. It's 2008. The global financial crisis is unfolding. Lena is 20 years old, interning at a prestigious consulting firm right on the Paradeplatz in Zurich.
And she isn't there because she loves money?
No, she explicitly states that she studies economics because she wants to understand why people lie more honestly for money than they do for love.
What a lens to view the financial collapse through. From the outside, this consulting firm is a fortress of glass, leather, and reasonable, measured voices. But inside, it is fueled by pure, unadulterated panic.
The panic of realizing that the numbers on their screens have completely detached from reality.
But nobody in the office uses the word panic. If you're listening to this and you've ever worked in a corporate office, you know exactly what this looks like.
Oh, yeah.
It's that moment when everyone in a meeting knows a massive project is failing, but nobody wants to be the one to actually use the word failure, so they rely on polite, sterilized language.
We are seeing the societal fear of vulnerability from the 90s basically mutate into a corporate fear of vulnerability. The banking world insulates itself with vocabulary.
Right, let's unpack the mechanics of this. When an asset, say a complex bundle of debt, suddenly becomes toxic and worthless, a bank doesn't announce a crash. They call it valuation uncertainty.
Or a liquidity question.
Or market stress.
It's like watching your house burn down and calling it a rapid thermal expansion event.
That's brilliant. Exactly.
The polite vocabulary acts as a fire blanket for their conscience. It allows them to maintain the illusion of control. And Lena, who is doing the grunt work of checking data, actually spots the fire. She finds a discrepancy where a series of assets are valued completely differently across three separate files.
And she takes this to her boss, and he immediately brushes her off. He calls it a timing issue.
A timing issue.
It is the ultimate corporate deflection. It implies that the discrepancy isn't a structural lie, but simply a temporary lag in the paperwork. It uses time as a shield to avoid marking the asset down to its true, devastating value.
And when Lena pushes back, her boss looks at her and says, "You're an intern. Learn that a number doesn't lie just because you don't like it." He is explicitly demanding that she accept the polite fiction over the messy reality.
But Lena refuses to let it go.
Right.
She saves the file. And in the aftermath of this, we get the pivotal introduction of Viktor Falk. Lena is in the cafeteria, and this young man from another team sits down. Gray shirt, no tie, incredibly controlled demeanor. He takes one look at her and knows she found something she wasn't supposed to find.
She tells him about the files, and Viktor offers her a very specific piece of advice. He tells her to document the discrepancy. Not to blow the whistle, not to cause a public scandal, but to document it for herself.
Just to create a paper trail proving she asked the question so that when the explosion eventually happens, no one can claim she was the one who hid the error.
Now wait, I want to push back on Viktor's motive here.
Mm-hmm.
The natural reading is that he is subtly teaching her the art of corporate complicity, right? Like how to stay quiet while looking innocent. But is he actually teaching complicity? Because if she doesn't document it and instead screams from the rooftops, she just gets fired. The file vanishes and nothing changes. Isn't he actually just teaching her how to survive a rigged game without becoming the scapegoat?
That is a highly perceptive challenge. You're right that he is offering a survival tactic in an environment designed to crush dissent, but the cost of that survival is moral passivity. Viktor is teaching her how to be legally innocent while remaining structurally complicit. He is showing her how to navigate the architecture of denial without dismantling it. And Lena realizes this immediately. She tells him to his face that documenting a lie and doing nothing else is a very low standard.
But the tragedy is that she takes the advice.
She does?
She stays. She documents the file, receives a beautifully crafted, entirely neutral corporate response, and learns a vital lesson: that neutral answers in finance are specifically engineered to stop people from proving anything.
And she moves into forensic auditing, dedicating her career to finding what a spreadsheet isn't saying. But Viktor's pragmatic, cynical advice sticks with her, and that ideological clash between them just stews for 15 years.
Which brings us to the climax of this segment. We jump forward to 2023. The backdrop is monumental. We are watching the historic, real-world collapse of Credit Suisse and its emergency takeover by UBS.
The entire city of Zurich is calling it a rescue, but Viktor, who is now the head of Falk Rhine Asset Partners, correctly identifies it as a liquidation.
He and Lena, who is now an independent forensic auditor, meet in a loud bar near the Rhine in Basel. The music is deliberately deafening, so no one can eavesdrop on banking conversations.
Let's really examine the mechanics of what Viktor explains here. He argues that size isn't the problem with a bank. A massive bank can be highly efficient. The actual danger, he says, is interconnectedness.
Right. Explain that to me. Because how does one bank's messy ledger actually threaten a totally separate institution across the street?
Okay, so it comes down to financial leverage and counterparty risk. Imagine a giant web of dominoes, but instead of just standing next to each other, they are glued together by complex derivative contracts.
Okay.
If Bank A holds billions in toxic assets that were insured by Bank B, and Bank A collapses, Bank B is suddenly on the hook for money it doesn't have.
Oh, wow.
Which then threatens Bank C, who loaned money to Bank B. The bank becomes so entangled in the global system that it cannot fail without dragging the entire economy down with it. It forces the public to bear the cost of private risk-taking, privatizing the profits, socializing the losses.
And while Viktor is delivering this macroeconomic analysis, Lena drops an absolute bomb. She isn't there to talk theory. She tells him that while she was in a data room for a new mandate, she found a specific identifier, a reference to a K folder linked to the name Rossi Dervishi.
The K Reserve. We are finally seeing the ghost in the machine of the Swiss banking system. The K Reserve operates as a mirror for real-world shadow banking, where assets and liabilities are deliberately kept off the main regulatory ledger.
And when Lena brings it up, Viktor immediately tries to deploy the same tactic Lena's boss used in 2008. He downplays it. He claims it's just an old, poorly structured file.
But Lena has spent 15 years learning how to read between the lines. She knows he's been hiding it. And Viktor pivots to a deeply manipulative strategy. He tells her, I don't want you to open files that could harm people before you know what's in them.
If we investigate the power dynamic in that sentence, it is textbook manipulation disguised as care.
Absolutely.
He is trying to dictate the terms of her investigation, but he frames his control as a desire to protect her. Later, when they were walking by the black waters of the Rhine, Lena calls him out. She says, "You want to control me."
And Viktor replies, I want to prevent you from doing something you'll regret. Lena realizes those two statements mean exactly the same thing.
The tension here is incredible. She sees the danger he represents. She understands exactly how corporate power can disguise itself in moments of physical closeness. But they're standing on the bridge, and Lena completely flips the dynamic. She looks at him and says, "If you want to kiss me, ask."
It's a brilliant intellectual power play. By forcing him to ask, she strips away his ability to maneuver. She forces him to abandon the corporate plausible deniability and be entirely uncomfortably vulnerable.
But crossing that line doesn't magically create transparency. They go back to his apartment, and they were lying in the dark. Lena finally asks the question that has been hanging over them. She says, "Tell me about Kay."
And Viktor goes completely still. He looks at her and says, not tonight.
She pushes him, asking why not. He claims he doesn't want to give her a half-truth. So Lena says, "Then give me a whole one," and Viktor replies, "I can't."
The author is very explicit here. This is the first lie Viktor tells her. And the lie isn't that the statement, "I can't," is factually false.
Right.
The lie is in the omission. The lie is his unilateral decision that she is not allowed to know the truth about her own family's history. He is deliberately withholding data to maintain his leverage.
Which makes the narrative structure of the novel so effective here. Because instead of showing us the immediate screening match or the fallout of that lie, the author hits fast forward. We jump straight to chapter 53, into the year 2026.
The nonlinear storytelling is doing heavy lifting here. By showing us the aftermath in 2026 before we see the battles of 2024 and 2025, we understand the devastating systemic consequences before we fully understand the war.
Yeah, we find ourselves in a sterile meeting room with a working group called the Arbeitsgruppe Archive und Ausgleich, the Archive and Compensation Working Group. Lena is sitting there with historians, data protection experts, and auditors. Ruth is patched in via video screen.
The secret of the K reserve is out, but it has been institutionalized. It's being managed by the very bureaucracy that created the problem. An auditor suggests calculating a minimum contribution for a payout based on traceable assets.
Minimum contribution. It is the exact same sterilized language as timing issue or valuation uncertainty. It is a phrase designed to limit liability rather than achieve justice. But the most revealing moment of this 2026 flash forward happens after the meeting when the room empties out and Viktor walks in.
He looks completely hollowed out. He tells Lena that the restructuring plan is finalized. He is losing his fund. He is losing his seat on the board. He is losing his variable compensation. He might lose the entire company as he knows it.
And Lena asks him why he's willingly going through with the restructuring if the personal cost is so catastrophic.
And Viktor gives an answer born of sheer, crushing exhaustion. He says, "Because I am tired of explaining that the damage we see is greater than the damage we don't see."
What does that mean mechanically, though?
It means that the cost of maintaining the architecture of denial, the energy required to hide the toxic assets, to suppress the K folders, to manage the lies of omission, has eventually outweighed the cost of the explosion itself.
Wow.
The system collapsed not just because of bad math, but because the weight of the silence became structurally unsustainable.
It is incredible how this narrative ties everything together. I mean, when we look at this massive sweep of time, from Daryoush in 1988 to Lena in 2026, the through line is undeniable.
It really is.
Whether it is a government making a man prove he belongs by asking for a receipt of his friendships, or a banking system hiding its insolvency behind polite phrases like market stress and timing issues, or a lover lying in the dark, withholding the truth under the guise of protection.
Systemic silence is always designed to protect power. But in the end, it unequivocally destroys trust. The cracks in the foundation don't just stay in the foundation. They travel all the way up the marble columns until the roof caves in.
Systemic silence protects power, but destroys trust. It leaves you wondering, well, if a society demands flawless compliance to grant you citizenship, and a corporation demands absolute silence to grant you a paycheck, is true belonging even possible in the modern world?
That's a heavy thought.
Or are we all just holding on to our own timing issues, terrified of getting kicked out of the room? We know the illusion of stability always demands a price, and we know that in 2026, the bill finally comes due. But we don't yet know how Lena and Viktor survived the collision of 2023.
Right, we know the bomb goes off, but we haven't seen the blast.
And that is exactly where we are heading next. In Episode 9 of our deep dive, the ultimate reckoning of the K-Reserve is on the horizon. The polite fictions are gone. Lena is going to force Viktor's hand, and the illusion of Swiss stability is going to be tested like never before. You will not want to miss it. We will see you next time for Episode 9 of our deep dive.